Okay, we're rolling. Hello, everyone. I'm Thomas Engelman, the Director of Galleries at Howard Community College, and I'm thrilled to have with me today Adam Weir. We'll be discussing his exhibition, Horizons. Adam is an Eastern Shore of Maryland native, and he received his BFA from Salisbury University and his MFA in painting from Towson University. Adam continues his studio practices and lives on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, where he's an accomplished tattoo artist. Adam, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today about your exhibition.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
All right, so I'm going to share with the group my screen and the exhibition. Adam, can you see the exhibition on your end?
Yes.
Excellent. So, with this exhibition, I'm pretty accustomed to your work. I would say that is more on the latter end of this exhibition in terms of structure, composition. But walk us through a little bit of this this body of work, and maybe talk a little bit about this first piece.
Okay. This is one of the most recent completed pieces out of like the recent body of work that I'm working on. Definitely a departure from some previous work that you'll see in the same exhibit, but I wanted to kind of put them all together to kind of just give a little bit of context for some things. Then also just, you kind of caught me at this really big like transition, you know what I mean, between the kind of the way that I'm approaching my work. So yeah, I thought it'd be kind of interesting to just kind of have both, so that, and then you can kind of get little bits and pieces of where the departure kind of came from. But yeah, so this is one of the first ones that's been fully completed, that's gone almost like completely abstract.
Sure. Yeah. And there, between this one and see, this size with this first one is larger than I recall seeing some of your older works. You kind of stepped up in scale.
Exactly. Yeah, I've actually been working. Partially, it's due to my studio space is fairly small, so it just makes it easier for me to work on a smaller scale. I think with some newer work, I am venturing out to make some larger pieces. But yeah, it's definitely traditionally, in the past, I've just worked kind of on small things because I've worked on paper mostly. But now I'm kind of switching back to working on canvas a bit, and I'm still going to try to do some things on paper as well, just because I enjoy that as well. It feels a little looser, so to do that. So
sure,
it's good.
Absolutely. And these are more of that kind of size I had mentioned before in terms of dimension.
Yeah.
One question I kind of had too is I'm seeing this, this really like analogous color scheme that you're working with. Can you talk a little bit about your palette with these pieces? Was it something that you planned, or was this just something that naturally occurred?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. So you can actually see where some of these colors initially started in some of the older work, where it was like it's more like monochromatic, and then, or it's like even like a lot of them are like black and gray with a little bit, of just like that kind of pinkish kind of tone. That came from, I had taken a trip out to visit a friend of mine in Portland, Oregon a few years ago, kind of like when this body of work kind of started. And I went to the museum out there, and they had this, there was a big painting by Helen Frankenthaler. I really love her work. And I saw this, and there's just like, I can't remember the name of the piece, but there was just like, her normal work and this big painting. And then there was like this small little, just single brush stroke of like this pink color. And I just loved the way that it looked, and I was like, oh man, it just really kind of grabbed me. And I was like, man, I just love that. And then I just kind of brought that home. And then a couple other like travels and stuff that I'd done. And my wife and I drove cross country. So we'd driven through the desert a lot. And there seemed to be like these kind of, like pink, magenta, like mauve, like undertones, like in dirt and things like that. And just kind of like naturalistic colors. So I kind of brought that into it as well, and then I kind of just ran with it. I just seemed to kind of like the way that it was turning out and experimenting with it a little bit. And that's kind of where I'm at. I'm just letting things kind of evolve on their own and not try to overthink it too much. And then if it works, it works. And it doesn't,
Yeah, great. And just a technical question with one of the, where I'm looking at spring too. These are on paper. Are you using any type of medium or anything? Because there's a really beautiful textured surface to them, just at least from what I can see over the screen.
Yeah, no, so I wasn't actually. I just was layering a lot. I would thin the paint down a lot with just water and then just continually layer things, and then even like it would give it kind of a washy, look for certain areas, and I could kind of thicken up some areas as well. For the newer works on canvas, I am using a medium to kind of just get a little more viscosity, um but yeah, that's the thing I like using like the acrylic on the paper, because you can kind of make it really washy in like some areas and kind of like get a bunch of different, like create space with just the different textures.
Sure. Was there, and even getting into this piece, I love, at least from my perspective, again, just seeing bits of, I can see those layers you were talking about and potentially even some like underdrawing within this
Mhm.
piece. Is there a reason why you chose to work with acrylic over oil, or was the medium not really a factor in your?
Yeah, I chose I pretty much worked with like acrylic and watercolor and gouache since undergrad. Yeah, I everybody, you kind of learn in oil and just like the basic with everything, and I just never had the patience for oil painting. I just the drying time and not being able to work on something as vigorously like I wanted to. I just made the switch to acrylic, to even the point with some work, like I have a blow dryer and I'll blow dry some areas like till it dries faster so I can like continue to kind of work on it. I was never really big on like having, a large body of work all going at one time, have a few paintings
Sure.
going on at once, and then some studies and things like that. But yeah, it was just more about me being able to work whenever I wanted. So
Excellent. Yeah, and when you're working, would you say, do you work on multiple pieces at once, or are you kind of like, I work till I'm done on one? Uh,
yeah, I pretty much have about like two, at least like two or three going at once, most likely. And then like I said, like I'll also be doing like studies and things for like other work. Like if I see something that's happening in one piece, I'll kind of like try to work that out maybe for another piece or something like that. So to kind of just continue the ideas kind of flowing through. So that way I'm just
sure.
kind of ready to jump on something else when another piece is kind of completed.
Right. And I, like you had mentioned, we're kind of seeing from the beginning of the page up here, um, in this piece dual, where we're kind of, I can see kind of the progression of like in this piece, this other piece titled Spring, where I could see where you were having some more kind of drawing and painting. I could see more of the layers building up. And there's like more I would say less information in them. And with the last one at the top of the page, there's more of it's more color field and more larger shapes. Are you slowly kind of, I would say, eliminating like images and or information within the paintings? Are you making them more simplistic as
I
time
think
goes on?
so. Yeah, I'm definitely drawn to, or becoming more drawn to, the more minimalist side of things. And I mean, even when I look at other people's work too, it has a lot of impact for me when it's like less is more almost. So yeah, I'm slowly trying to get there and try to make it kind of work, to so that I'm satisfied with it. Yeah.
Yeah, and with something like this, this untitled piece called Seeds, these seem to be a bit more. They have a bit more of a narrative to them compared to the other ones. Was that intentional, or is that just? I guess. How did you get to this work and then moving into like where you're at now?
Yeah, my work was always really heavily narrative based. And you'll even remember from like work from like, from grad school and things like that. Like it was always heavily narrative. Um, and I think a lot of it kind of had to do with just wanting to make something that wasn't so like, okay, I have to have a specific idea with this. I could just sit down and like see how, just kind of let loose a little bit. And I think that also goes hand in hand with me, the more that I got into tattooing and like started my tattoo career, because there's a certain amount of rules and things you have to follow with tattooing. It's just the way it is. So I think in my studio practice, I wanted to just kind of let go of that a bit and just be a little more freeing. Tattooing, you're working, it's not just your ideas, but it's also your client's ideas as well, and you're kind of meshing the two to create something that's, the end product that is successful, for both parties involved. So
Sure.
with my work, that it's all just me, I just wanted to kind of like try something that was more of like an experiment and kind of see how it went.
Great. Yeah. So you would say kind of the technical tattooing side of your profession, it kind of uh, springboarded you into working more loosely, correct? And kind of
Yes.
more of
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
I can totally understand that.
Yeah.
Um, like when we get into like this piece, I love this piece just for uh, the attention to form within this fabric,
Mhm.
but also the very illustrative, flat and superimposed area to the right. Um, with these pieces, can you, I guess, see yourself, potentially using kind of this color field, you know, painting in a way, abstract expressionist kind of form to, I don't know, do something kind of similar because they seem very, especially within this type of work, I guess there's little ideas that link you together.
Mhm.
Is that something that, potentially you'd play with within abstract painting, or are you thinking more of just because the compositional space too, right, is very filled with the abstract field, and then with these, they're a little more open.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna kind of almost maybe come full circle with with the abstract stuff, but kind of going back towards more like compositions like this, where it's a little more minimal. You know what I mean? And the negative space with these works is like plays such a huge role, that I'm just trying to maybe revisit that idea for some future. I'm actually working on a piece now that's kind of a little less full. Just kind of emptying things out a little bit to kind of see how that plays out.
Sure. Um, great. And with this one too, this one's one of a friend of mine's favorite pieces. It uh, is this predominantly is this acrylic and what other materials are you using with this
So
one?
yeah, so this one's actually acrylic, watercolor, and graphite and gouache. So it's kind of a mixture. I got everything on here. So it's like the abstracted kind of rock formation is acrylic. Um, the cactus is watercolor, and the barbed wire is gouache, and then the cells and the like bones are all graphite.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful piece. I mean, they're all gorgeous, but this one just has there's so much going on in terms of contrast and value. They look great together. Um, and this one I can start to see, when you initially were speaking about, when you traveled cross country and were at least, within this pinkish, like at least from my screen, color in the background. Where is this kind of where you started thinking about, playing with, I guess, these more abstract color field paintings?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're just with these pieces, especially like with the ones with the cactus and stuff, they're really highly detailed, and I was trying to make sense in my mind of like, okay, I put all this time and effort like into these areas, and then how do I break free of that kind of rigidity and like make it so it seems not as important, and that like the time devoted to one thing isn't outweighing, something else. So I'm just was kind of like, okay, so what if I just painted this thing really detailed and then just painted right over it, and just
Yeah.
see how that made me feel, and then have it,
Yeah.
and it was very liberating for sure. So that was kind of a big step for me to kind of be like, okay, because and previous work had always been extremely highly detailed. So that was a big transition for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is within the last week. And again, this is, I guess, where you could see where it's very liberating since you essentially painted a swatch or a rectangle over top of, I guess, not the most detailed spot, but the most developed, I guess, in the center of this composition.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It works out really well. While I've got you here as well, is there, how has, I guess, when you were getting into tattoo arts, what was kind of your decision in going into that form of work? Because I mean, you're a very accomplished painter and tattoo artist at the same time. What kind of drove you into the world of tattooing?
Well, I've always been very interested in history. It's like art history, world history, things like that. And tattooing always intrigued me just as um, it's one of the oldest art forms, you know, that's been on this planet, like, and that humans have been doing it on each other for centuries. You know, it's a very strong um, link with cultures and things like that. And that's very interesting to me. And I think it's interesting to just how it's evolved over time. And it's still like almost like a primal kind of instinct that people have that could put marks on their bodies, you know, whether it's like a coping mechanism or it's for, you know, just a way to kind of express who they are, how they feel inwardly, you know, it's just been very interesting for me. So yeah. And then specifically speaking, you know, the traditional American way of tattooing is kind of always just looked visually pleasing to me. It's very bold, bright colors, you know what I mean? It's simplistic imagery, but it has a lot of impact. And those kind of images have just really stood the test of time as well. You know, images from like the 20s, 30s, 40s, you know, they have just as much visual power then as they do now, you know, and that's really cool to me how it just kind of like, it doesn't matter the time frame, you know, you see in certain image, whether it's like a ship or a skull or like a pinup girl or something like, or a heart and a dagger. It's like, you just know, man, like to me, that just looks like a tattoo, you know, and it could be like,
Yeah.
if you change like the image and you put it on a sailor from 1945, you know what I mean? Or somebody walking down the street today, and it's still, you know, exactly what it is from down the street, you know?
Yeah, it's I'm a huge fan of flash art. You know, I could look at those books all day, especially in different shops. It is I guess to end this, is there any other piece you want to touch on again, or anything we've left out?
Um, no, I don't think
Yeah,
so.
I've
Yeah.
I feel like we've covered it well. You know, I'm really pleased to have you participating virtually. Um, Everyone, you can view Adam's exhibition if you go to um, howardcc.edu/galleries. His exhibition is currently featured in the Horowitz Center webpage. Um, Adam, I again thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to talk with us about your exhibition, and you were great. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
All right.